Large Lenny here. Recently I uploaded a video titled REUPLOAD has been falsely accused and his reputation has been ruined for no reason. The video was pretty good all things considered, but there are a few issues such as the fact that you had to go into this description to see the evidence, that I used a text-to-speech voice rather than my actual voice, and although I have modified it a little bit here. I also wasn't able to really go in as depth as much as I wanted to about all the stuff that happened and wasn't even able to cover some things. The purpose of this video is to mend all those areas so as to make a more polished, presentable video that you could better learn from and show off your friends or others online so that the knowledge that REUPLOAD is innocent becomes more widespread. With that clarification out of the way, let's actually dive into the original accusations and then walk our way through that. Alright, so on January 12, 2022, False Cow posts a major Twitter thread saying that REUPLOAD groomed minors and that he was a manipulated person, and then shortly after that a bunch of other people did their own Twitter threads adding on to what False Cow said. And I'd like to take on each of these points one by one and then show how every one of them is false, and then from that talk about why I think REUPLOAD was framed, as well as some other things relating to that of REUPLOAD and the EXE team as a whole. Timestamps will be put within the description if you want to go to certain accusations or topics I have discussed here, but I highly recommend you watch the entire video and don't skip anything. So, the initial as well as the most often stated point is that REUPLOAD allegedly groomed a minor, that minor being KubiCorg, and then from that tried to prevent KubiCorg from going out with his accusation that he had been groomed by REUPLOAD. We'll cover the second point about trying to prevent KubiCorg from showing his statement, but for now I want to focus on that first part, that being the initial grooming. The first thing that should be noted about the alleged grooming that REUPLOAD did on KubiCorg was that REUPLOAD at the time was 18 years old and that KubiCorg was 16. That's an age difference of 2 years. We know this because the fact that REUPLOAD's birthday, via a testimony document that he made, is on January 19th, 2003, and keep that birthday in mind by the way because we're going to use it later, and doing the math that would have made him 18 when the ERP occurred. And we know as well that KubiCorg was 16 because the original Twitter thread accusing REUPLOAD of being a pedophile directly says that. Now, an age difference of 2 doesn't sound much like pedophilia to me at all, but hey, if you want to argue that it actually is, then I would first recommend, before making your point, that you go to every single high school in the US and you arrest every single senior dating a junior. After you do that, then you can make your point about how REUPLOAD engaging in ERP with someone 2 years younger than them was pedophilia. Another very important factor that was very conspicuously left out is the fact that KubiCorg was the one who came up with the idea of ERPing with REUPLOAD in the first place, and actually egged REUPLOAD on because originally REUPLOAD was quite concerned that maybe this ERP could potentially be used in the future to bite him in the back, and look at what happened. He was correct. Speaking of this event, there's been a recent development with KubiCorg, the quote-unquote victim in this situation who, after the 3.0 leak revealed that he was a liar, did actually, honest to God, say that no matter how small the age difference is, if one person is a minor or the other person isn't, that still should be considered grooming and pedophilia. Taken to its logical conclusion, that would mean that if someone that just turned 18 were to flirt with someone that was going to turn 18 tomorrow, that should be considered as grooming and pedophilia, and therefore that person should be sent to jail and have to register as a sex offender. Do you see how insane this sounds? Also, another thing is that the image that KubiCorg attached to the point he made that I just talked about is as well just another complete straw man. I mean, the situation itself that he did with REUPLOAD was not between a 20 and a 14-year-old, but an 18 and 16-year-old. If the age difference is 2 years, then that immediately rules out that it's pedophilia. And the important thing at that point is whether or not the sexual act that the two of them did was consensual or not. As it has already been proven that KubiCorg wanted to start the ERP in the first place, then we thereby know that yes, the ERP between the two of them was okay, and it was not like pedophilia or grooming or sexual harassment or anything of that sort of nature. Oh, and also one last thing, REUPLOAD isn't trying to ruin your life or get you or anything like that. They're just trying to prove that they're innocent, which they are, and you happen to be the one that threw all these false accusations at him in the first place, so yeah, of course he's going to have to mention you if he wants to disprove them. So, in the original Twitter thread that started all this REUPLOAD drama, the second point that they used to prove that REUPLOAD is a groomer is that he's allegedly also groomed a 14-year-old. Now this accusation too, similar to the previous situation where it said that REUPLOAD groomed a minor when in reality he just did ERP with someone 2 years younger than him, also has a few important details that are left out. First one is that with all these comments that REUPLOAD makes, not one of them is actually said towards the 14-year-old at all. Rather, the comments are about a drawing that the person did. Now, the drawing that Revie was making a comment about is in regards to a 36-year-old rat woman, and not one of those anime ways where the woman is like apparently 100, but she looks like she's 8, but like the character actually looks 36, like they have adult proportions and everything like that, as you can see here. I'm going to be keeping this image up for a little bit longer as well, so that I can then address the additional claim that Revie did a nude or not safe for work version of this person's character, when in reality, this is the drawing that they did, the one that I still have up. They gave her 36-year-old rat boobs, and that's it. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think about not safe for work content, I think that like, oh, well, the character is naked, or at the very least they're not wearing much at all. Whereas, if you will continue to look at this image that's still up, this character is very clearly wearing clothing, and not of like the skimpy kind. Now, the original accusation also said that that's no pedophilia, because the artist is a 14-year-old and the drawing that they use is their persona or whatever it's called, so it's supposed to represent them, and therefore Revie indirectly made comments towards them. But I must ask, is this rat woman literally the artist? Like, is the artist even close to looking like a 36-year-old rat woman in real life? I don't think that's the case. Also, as a final thing for this section, even the artist is okay with the comments, so it's not even like you would say, oh well, the artist wasn't okay with what Revie was saying. So, when originally making my first video, I was told of this accusation, and it initially seemed to me to be a sort of last-ditch effort to make Revie still seem like a pedophile after all the original claims against him were proven false. And I intuitively knew that even if it was real, there was definitely something fishy in the way it was presented, and as it turns out, yeah, I'm correct on this as well. Similar to the initial accusation that Revie groomed a minor, but in reality, he just did ERP with someone 2 years younger than him. In this situation, what was told as Revie showed his breast to a minor is actually that one, he never did show his breast in the first place. Madzilla himself admits in the Twitter thread, and also admits that most he showed his belly and played with a bra underneath his shirt. The second thing as well is that Madzilla at the time was 17. 1-7. I was editing this and I listened to the clip again, and I wanted to make sure I had the exact age correct, so I looked it up, and Madzilla's birthday is on February 13th, 2004. So, unless this incident, this event, whatever, occurred before February 13th, 2021, then yeah, Madzilla was 17. So, the age difference is actually 1. It's not even 2. And Revie was 18, so the age difference was 1 year. Again, I have to fix this because, you know, I looked back at it. Anyway, yeah, so that's what I think. Unless this occurred in that 1 month time frame between Revie's birthday and Madzilla's birthday, but I highly doubt that. So yeah, I have to fix this as well. My bad. Which again, you know, that's not pedophilia or grooming or whatever, right? Even if you don't believe a bit of what I'm saying in spite of all the evidence shown here, then you can look at the fact that Madzilla, the person that Revie allegedly groomed in the situation, agreed that the situation was not grooming and that it was a misunderstanding. So, if you're not going to listen to me, then, you know, maybe listen to Madzilla instead. So, I'm including this accusation because it may be mentioned as like the last resort after everything else has been disproven, so I'm going to just try and quickly covered. From what I've gathered, apparently a person by the name of Mikey accused Revie of grooming him in 2019 when he was 15, while Revie was allegedly 18, as well as the fact that apparently Revie sent Mikey thigh pictures. This covers a lot of stuff that I've already talked about, but Revie was born in January 19th, 2003, which would have made him 16 when that occurred, so a age difference of a single year is what makes this apparently considered pedophilia. I think you can figure out how incorrect such an accusation of pedophilia is in that situation. As well as that with this thigh pic accusation, I've not even seen a little bit of evidence that this is true at all. So, you know, I don't even know what to tell you here. I can't exactly disprove something that's never been proven in the first place. And considering the fact that this Mikey fellow lied about Revie's age, I also don't think it would be hard to believe that he also lied about Revie sending thigh pics. So, there are various things that people point to in order to show that Revie is some sort of manipulator, so within this section I'm going to have a bunch of subsections and go into each one by one, and then as always you can look into the description box for timestamps for specific points, but, you know, as always, watch the entire thing, right? So, now that we've proven that Revie did not actually groom KubiCorg, that Revie instead engaged in ERP with someone 2 years younger than him, the incident of him chasing down the victim instead becomes Revie's logically worried that he's about to be framed and have his life ruined. Similar to every other situation we've already discussed, some pretty important evidence has been left out of this accusation. 9 days prior to Revie being worried about why KubiCorg is screenshotting their direct messages, he contacts KubiCorg about apologizing for engaging in ERP with him. As you see in the screenshot that I currently have up, KubiCorg responds with, hey, don't worry about it. I promise it stays between us, and yeah, a freaking chorus, but I'm not sharing it. Having all of this in mind, not only that the interaction between Revie and KubiCorg was in the first place consensual and the age difference was 2 years, but also the fact that 9 days prior to KubiCorg screenshotting all their DMs, he said that wasn't an issue. If you were in Revie's shoes, wouldn't you two be freaking out that something bad is about to happen to you that you don't deserve, especially when KubiCorg starts to say stuff about holding you accountable? Keep in mind, by the way, that all of this occurred on Christmas Day, and that it occurred because Revie went out of his way to wish KubiCorg a Merry Christmas and ask what he got that day. Imagine how Revie must have felt throughout Christmas Day, freaking out about the fact that there's a real imminent danger of his life being ruined at any second. And imagine what kind of person you have to be to threaten someone on Christmas. Another claim that was put as proof that Revie is a manipulator is that he forced his own original character, Faker, into the mod. Contrary to that, however, if you look at this, you will see that while Rightburst was still director of the mod, Revie contacted him asking if Faker could be added in. As the screenshots show, it was Rightburst who presented the character to the team and who was the one who initially convinced the team to add the character. Faker was not forced in, rather the team agreed to have him in on the roster. Also, I think it's worth noting the fact that Faker was a genuinely good pick that was voted on rather than forced in is also proven by the fact that since Faker's removal, the EXE team has made multiple different characters that use the same gimmick in the first place. First stage they look normal, second stage, as it turns out, it was all a trick and they're actually spooky and scary and creepy and other stuff like that. So along with the accusation that Revie forced in Faker, there was also the accompanying one that Revie forced retook power and became director of the mod, even though nobody wanted him to, but like all the other accusations, there's also some stuff left out with this one as well. After 1.0's release, Lightburst wasn't exactly the best at being director, rushing the mod as well as stressing out the team because he wouldn't tell them anything, which eventually culminated in 1.5's release being so okayish compared to the rest of the mod. Eventually, something had to give in, so the middle of October, Rightburst got deranked, and Revie got the official title of director. I stress the official part of that because even prior to that, he was helping to manage the mod due to Rightburst's incompetence. The reason why he did so, that is taking up the role of director, is because Revie has a genuine passion for that of the mod. And I just think the fact that the Sonic.exe 2.0 update, you can just look at the quality of it, how great it is, how it's probably one of the best mods, if not the best mod, is just a testament to his labor of love for the genre. Also, as a side thing, it's a great way to contrast between that of the team under Revie's direction, which actually managed to release one of the best updates for a Friday Night Funkin' mod, actually managed to get it out, and then the team under its current post-Revie direction, which suffers from constant leaks, removing tons of songs, and just having it feel as though that like every week there's new drama that plagues its development. Following that of their framing of Revie and now having to get all traces of him out of the mod, one of the most devious lies created without Revie, similar to how he allegedly forced Faker into the mod, which we now know that isn't true, so too did he try and force Faker into Slaybells when it was originally supposed to be Majin. Though I do like Majin, this too, like the original claim that Faker was forced into the mod, is also false. The initial plan was to have Lord X and Faker duet because Lord X is the creator of Faker and both were made up of the same matter. Which not only is cool Faker lore, if you're interested in that stuff, but also proof that Faker's inclusion fit into that of Slaybells. Oh, and also one last thing before I move on to the next section of this video. Turns out I didn't need to do this entire video at all, actually. Literally, as it turns out, all I needed to do was show that Common Gaming and Avery literally admitted to the fact that the accusations against Revie were overblown and that the evidence against him wasn't actually evidence at all. Don't believe me? Look at these screenshots I provided that prove that they actually said this, that they recognize all these claims against Revie are fake, yet they say not a single thing about it. Sure says something about the quality of their character and how good their intentions are actually when they only say this stuff in private DMs and not publicly. So, since I made the first video, a few people have asked me, oh, didn't Revie admit to doing all of this and didn't they apologize about all of it? But, kind of like with the law, someone could claim that they're guilty and take the blame for what they didn't do because they recognize that if they don't, and instead try to defend themselves, you're going to end up in a way worse position. So for example, in this screenshot, Revie says that yeah, initially he tried to defend himself, but he ended up saying that yeah, nobody's going to listen to him, as well as the fact that he was being pressured by people around him to just give in and claim that he's guilty. I feel like everybody here has seen what it's like to go against the Twitter mob. You try and be polite and answer others' arguments by showing evidence, but you end up getting flooded with comments and quote tweets saying ratio, that you should take the L, or even actually awful stuff like how you should kill yourself, and just getting flooded with like slurs and insults at you, which is actually like 90% of the comments that Revie got. It should also be noted that the mob got so rabid that Revie actually ended up getting sent real life child pornography. So yeah, with all of that in mind, I think if you were in Revie's shoes, I think you could see the less awful disadvantages of caving to the mob rather than trying to defend yourself and likely making the mob even angrier and the situation even worse. This video is already pretty long as it is, so I just want to quickly say that at the end of the day, I'm not omniscient. I too, like everyone else, have other responsibilities besides just proving that Revie was framed. So even though I've just made the super long video proving that Revie is innocent, I still don't have the superhuman ability to just at every single little thing thrown at Revie. As well as the fact that with all accusations in general, it's much easier to just claim something than to actually disprove it. What I'm trying to get at here is that after watching this entire video, when you then see somebody say that like, oh well, in 1983, Revie murdered 3 children and manipulated their parents, and was actually the reason why Weekend got delayed, blah, 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 and a bunch of other stuff like that, please just take it with like a grain of salt and consider the fact that the people making these points are also likely the ones that spread the stuff about how Revie groomed a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old and manipulated the EXE team. When in reality, Revie did none of these things, as I've just shown. So, it's like, what's more likely to you? That they lied about everything else, but this is the one time they're right. This is the one time they're right. Or that they're just trying to defend themselves after being caught as the liars that they are. So I want to clarify why I talked about UpTaunt in the last video. One is just to show how absolutely insane the EXE team is, likely due to how much time they spent on Twitter, because they called UpTaunt a pedophile because he's 18 and was in a relationship with someone that was 17. So yeah, my example of an 18-year-old flirting with someone that's gonna turn 18 tomorrow example isn't even like hyperbolic, because they got mad at the equivalent of a senior from high school dating another senior. Also, I just gotta say, do you see how stupid that sounds? That you could potentially become a pedophile in the eyes of these people if you turn 18 while your partner's still 17, and until they also turn 18, they would still say that you're a groomer and manipulator and pedophile and should be thrown in jail. The other point I wanted to make from bringing up UpTaunt is just kind of the irony of the situation as well. That UpTaunt was originally one of the people to jump onto the Revie as a pedophile groomer manipulator bandwagon, and look at what happened to him. One of the reasons why he got thrown out was because the age difference between him and the person he was hitting on was 1 year. There's been some various people after all of this stuff on Revie's innocence has come out in which they maintain a position in the middle of the issue that both Revie and JesterFrog are bad, and therefore the only thing that must be done now is to demand justice for what JesterFrog has done. Yeah, in what way could what Revie and JesterFrog did be even compared? Revie, as I have just proven was framed, has done none of what they accused him at all in the various accusatory Twitter threads they made against him. JesterFrog, on the other hand, actually manipulated a 14-year-old into giving him nudes. In fact, we know this to be true because the fact that Crybed and Com Gaming, people who defended JesterFrog, literally admit to this. It doesn't stop there, however. When this victim asked him to delete the nudes, he then refused to, and only when his actions were exposed did he actually end up deleting them. Oh, and I just found out about this while editing, so sorry that I'm including it at the end, but also, when the victim originally came out with her document, JesterFrog and a bunch of his friends came after the victim and harassed and victim blamed her because she apparently had bad intent. Yet that begs the question, why does the intent matter if at the end of the day the person that's exposed is actually an evil person? People such as JesterFrog and others coming to his defense may see in response to what have shown that he's already done his time and paid his dues, but that is such a joke. The fact that JesterFrog is still able to have a Twitter account and tweet stuff for months after he was initially exposed, only recently closing down his account due to all this stuff proving that Revie's innocent has come out, proves the fact that at most JesterFrog got a slap on the wrist. In fact, if you don't believe me on this, then you can look at this comment in which Avery says that because JesterFrog had good intentions, while Revie did it, that means that JesterFrog is allowed to be forgiven. Of course, that begs the question, how is engaging in ERP with someone 2 years younger than you more malicious than getting child pornography from a 14-year-old then refusing to delete those photos? The only logical answer to this is that Avery and others on the team have a heavy bias in favor of JesterFrog and a heavy bias against Revie. Another comment proving the favoritism towards JesterFrog is in this one, where Crybed directly says that JesterFrog was a pedophile, then had a whole redemption arc. The most disgusting part about this is the way Crybed phrases it, like it's some little cartoon movie where the guy goes through a funny little 2-minute redemption arc, when in reality it was JesterFrog getting naked photos of a 14-year-old child sent to him and then refusing to delete them. One final note in this section is that various people tried to defend what JesterFrog did by saying that the age difference between the two was 2 years, but geez dude, talk about the irony in that situation. Revie ERPing with the one person who egged him on also had an age gap of 2 years, and in Revie's situation there was no child pornography or a refusal to delete said child pornography in the first place. I've also seen some arguments about how one was okay and not the other because Revie was an adult while JesterFrog wasn't, but this misunderstands the whole point of what pedophilia is. 18 isn't a magical number. You don't understand everything in the earth when you turn 18. That's why normal people are okay with, for example, a 17 and 18-year-old dating. They recognize even though the 18-year-old is technically an adult and the 17-year-old is technically a minor, that both of them have around the same level of competence, and therefore the relationship is not manipulative or grooming or pedophilia or whatever. That's why I use the example of the person that just turned 18 flirting with someone that's going to turn 18 tomorrow, because people recognize the fact that it's not automatically pedophilia, and that instead the difference between the ages matter. That's also why people typically think that a 20-year-old dating a 60-year-old is weird. The only reason why you would think that a relationship between a 17 and 18-year-old is pedophilia, or that the ERP that Revie engaged with KubiCorg was pedophilia or grooming or whatever, is because you spend too much time on Twitter. Now, with Revie finally proven innocent, with all the various accusations finally proven to be wrong and to be shown it's just a bunch of lies, there remains one question now that I would like to try and answer. Why? Why are all these clearly false accusations made against Revie? Why was Revie accused of being a pedophile even though very clearly was not one? And as well as that, why was Revie accused of being a manipulator even though Faker was voted on and even though he did not force himself in as director? Though it is impossible to go into a person's head and see what they truly think and the precise reasons behind why they do what they do, I have a theory that I strongly believe to be true that answers all these questions, as well as having the evidence to prove it. So, 1.0 comes out, and as the original Sonic.exe mod is very good, it ends up receiving tons of positive feedback that helps to give it another update. However, during the development of 1.5 and 2.0, Ripers isn't exactly the best director, so he ends up rushing 1.5 and also stressing the other devs on the team due to lack of communication. This eventually leads to Mar, Com Gaming, and others within the EXE team demoting Ripers, with Revie being replaced as the director. Though Revie actually did what a director is supposed to do and directs the mod towards this 2.0 update, various people within the EXE team start to develop a almost irrational hatred for Revie. The first person is obviously Ripers. Due to his incompetency as director, he gets demoted, and eventually from that he gets kicked off the team in December due to him continuing to be an issue. As a director, he was replaced by Revie, and when being kicked off in December, the vote was initiated by Revie as well. So I don't think it's unlikely to believe that he developed some sort of vendetta against Revie and planned to kick him off so he could then take his position back as director. The second group, however, is people like Mars Starbro, Calm Gaming, and Avery, those who wanted to add their own OCs into the mod out of a selfish desire to have their own stuff featured front and center in one of the most popular Friday Night Funkin' mods. Revie, being the good director that he is, attempts to reach a compromise between developing a functioning mod that actually comes out and having a bunch of OCs in the mod by proposing that of a side mod titled Misfits. Yet even then, they weren't content with that and continued to push for the inclusion of their various wacky original characters into the main mod. Eventually from this day, that is the group of EXE devs who wanted to push their OCs alongside people like Ripers decided to get together and form a clique dedicated to taking down Revie. Having people like Kubai, for example, gather screenshots of the ERP he pushed Revie into doing so as to be able to take it out of context and then frame Revie in the future. Finally, the plan culminates on January 12th of this year when they all make a big push at the same time to frame Revie and get him removed from the EXE mod. A coup d'etat, as they say, by using a combination of various uncontextualized screenshots as well as false allegations. It could also be noted that this takeover occurred 1 week before Revie's birthday, so imagine how he felt on his birthday after having all of his work removed and his reputation ruined the week before. Anyway, they finally end up getting control of the mod while looking as though that they exposed a pedophile, when the reality was that they framed an innocent person. They then used this newfound power to then add in their own OCs, and subsequently from that they end up derailing and destroying the mod. This theory that I've just proposed would explain why they did it all in the first place, why they took stuff out of context, why they made up false accusations, why they framed Revie, all because they just wanted power. And it would also explain why, as soon as Revie got kicked out of the team, they started pumping in their own OCs into the mod, and even in some cases just straight up put themselves into the mod, even though they said they weren't going to do that, because that's the reason why they wanted to take over in the first place. Oh, and also it would explain why, for example, after KubiCorg said that he wanted to hold Revie accountable, why he ignored all of Revie's requests to try and solve the issue and instead just ignored it or put it off. And that's because of the fact that he never did actually want to solve it. He instead wanted to use it to frame Revie. This theory would also help put in coherence why Revie was demonized while they treated JesterFrog so favorably, even though JesterFrog got and initially refused to delete the child pornography of a 14-year-old. Revie guided the team towards actually making a coherent and well-done mod, while JesterFrog happily indulged in the fantasies of the rest of the EXE team and himself wanted his own original OC EXEs to be included in the mod. The most ironic part about all of this is that the results of the coup d'etat and framing of Revie speak for themselves with the most recent 3.0 build, published subsequently after the EXE team disbanded, a buggy, unfinished, broken mess of a final version of the mod, the most perfect representation of what's occurred since Revie was framed. Even people such as Sastre helped to shed light on how awful the development of EXE was when they, that is everyone who was against Revie, finally took over the mod. Quote, many leaks, including songs and whole builds, team drama, immaturity, and a big lack of actually working together, all added up stress and emotional numbness, unquote. He doesn't even mention other stuff, such as the fact that the fake leaked build that showed your IP was made by someone in the EXE team, even though they initially said that it wasn't made by someone within the team.
We basically are telling you not to open this shit because it was posted by people who don't work on the mod and who are trying to fuck with people by showing their IPs.
Anyway, the point I wanted to make by quoting what Sastre said about the EXE team, as well as mentioning some other stuff that occurred within the EXE team, is that, well, doesn't this sound kind of like the state the EXE team was in while Rightverse was initially directing it? As Sastre describes other parts as well, such as the EXE team at one point having over 60 people, which I gotta ask, are you developing a AAA game or what? And it really does start to feel as though that Revie was the only thing preventing the mod from just jumping off a cliff. Also, one last thing to end off this section, some people have said that was the reason why this mod was cancelled, but in order for me to actually post something, somebody has to leak it somewhere in the first place, and the fact that this leaking business, all these leaked builds or whatever, was mostly happening after Revie was framed, might help give you a hint on what the EXE team was like after they kicked Revie out. Oh, and also, one last thing on top of the last, yeah, I get it, but it's very classy of you EXE devs to literally piss on Divide's grave. You know, that's really great. And if you don't believe me that this is actually Divide's work, then here's your evidence, here's your proof. So now that I've shown all the evidence and proven that Revie is innocent and talked about why I think it all occurred, I want to address one last subject: why this all took so long to come out. There's not really a single primary point that explains why it took half a year from the initial accusations against Revie by False Count and others to prove that Revie was framed, so I'll just list the most important ones. Revie talked about this initially and explaining why he deleted his tweets defending himself and then instead just apologized because it was less of a bad choice to do so, but Twitter actually is a hellhole. If you try to be polite and make well thought out points, you're going to receive 100 comments and 99 of them will be just some variation of ratio, or take the L, or just some swear thrown at you. Some people have tried to point out the various things I too pointed out in this video on Twitter, but they ended up getting flooded by the Twitter mob. It also didn't help that there was this big trend where a bunch of animators would make videos where Faker denounces Revie, and also every time was Faker included in a new song, Marstar Bro would get angry, so that prolonged the dogma as well. A good portion of what I've shown in this video was released like months ago, but the issue is that it was either relegated to either one-off comments on some random image board or was put in like a Google Doc that at most 15 people on Twitter saw. The average person that falsely thinks that Revie did groom children and is pedophile and manipulated people and other things like that aren't willing to scour said image boards and read said Google Docs because it would require more work than the average person would be willing to put in. Even if you were one of the rare few to find that Google Doc or find that one-off comment on that random image board, none of them ever covered every single accusation that was made against Revie. So yes, you would read the Google Doc and come to the conclusion that A is incorrect, but then when you showed that Google Doc to others, they would immediately ask, well, what about B and C? And because the Google Doc only covered one specific thing rather than everything, you couldn't make much of an argument against those 2 points. A lot of this stuff that I've shown here didn't really even come out until March. Some of the juicy bits such as Calm Gaming and Avery admitting that evidence proving that Revie is a pedophile and manipulator and other things of that nature was blown out of proportion, and that didn't really prove much. That only really came out within the past week, for example. I don't say this to insult Revie or whatever, but just to be honest about why it's taken so long for all this to come out. Revie is a good director, but he's not exactly able to keep a cool head when the mob comes at him, but to be fair, I don't think anybody could. That combined with the fact all the various accusations were thrown at him at once, as well as how he was receiving pressure to give in to the mob, led to Revie just giving up on defending himself, which to most people they saw him give in and thought, well, that's that, and didn't look any deeper into the subject. So with Revie's innocence being proven and the EXE team's various mishaps covered, what now? Well, I have a few thoughts on what to do in order for this truth to be spread as much as possible. First, various people with platforms within the Friday Night Funkin' community should be politely contacted and then asked to please say something regarding how Revie's innocent. Stress the fact the entire person's life was actually ruined for no discernible reason and show them the proof that I've shown here. I think a particularly good and well-intentioned person to ask that could help spread the truth of Revie's innocence is Luigi Kid. He originally did a video on Revie back when the original accusations were made, and within the video and in his various updates on Twitter, he's had quite an open mind regarding the situation and is willing to listen, so I feel too that if he knew what really happened, he would possibly be willing to make a video on how Revie's innocent. Originally there was a section about asking the EXE devs about the comments they have made regarding falsely accusing Revie, especially some of the ones by Calm Gaming and Avery, in which they admit that the evidence against Revie isn't evidence at all and that was all overblown, but the vast majority of them have locked or deleted their accounts, so yeah. The final point I want to urge is that if you yourself have a voice, no matter how small it is, you should try and say something about how Revie is innocent. All these false allegations were spread in the first place because people just dogmatically told one another without looking at the evidence that Revie was guilty. The only way such a thing can be countered is by instead spreading the truth. The only difference between what happened then and what ought to happen now is that those that know that Revie is innocent actually have evidence on their side. They know what really happened and thus are able to articulate and spread their points better than those who falsely believe that Revie is guilty. I urge you to please use this advantage as best you can. Share all of what I've shown here with people that you know, whether that's on Discord, Reddit, Twitter, or any place where you talk with others. Hell, if you have the ability to make a mod about how Revie was framed, maybe do so. I don't know. Look, I'm just ballparking you. Look, it's up to you. I'm just throwing stuff out, okay? Oh, and then as well, kind of like as a appendix or whatever you want to call it, in every situation which you're trying to spread the truth about Revie's innocence, I would recommend trying to be as civil as possible and respectfully present evidence that proves Revie's innocence, but in certain situations, it's harder to do that, such as in Twitter, for example. In such Bloodsport-esque social media platforms, it may be a wise move to make some of the points presented here in more digestible forms, whether that's in Twitter threads or in funny memes that you made or just anything like that that can easily be understood. Part of the reason why I made this video was so all this information could be more digestible, but even then there were still some people who are unwilling to watch a video, so that's where these Twitter threads or memes might come in handy. Still though, try to be courteous when arguing these points. It doesn't hurt. Anyway, I just wanted to wrap this video up by thanking you for watching this entire video. I ultimately hope that my efforts to make this video and spread the truth won't be in vain. In the description I've also put a download link to all the evidence I've gathered, some of which has stuff I didn't cover here. I did all of this because I know in my heart that Revie was framed and that his name should be exonerated.